The first transmission crackled through the static at 3:47 hours, Karachi Sector Airspace, Pakistan Air Force Command. Squadron leader Amir Khalil was nursing his third cup of chai when the unfamiliar call sign pierced the pre-dawn silence. Falcon Tower. This is Nightingale 77 requesting immediate clearance for emergency landing. Over. The voice was steady, professional, carrying the unmistakable cadence of someone who'd lived through more than training exercises. But the call sign didn't match anything in their registry. Khalil leaned forward, adjusting his headset. Nightingale 77, state your aircraft type and point of origin. A pause too long for comfort. Tower, aircraft type classified. Origin classified. Declaring fuel emergency, requesting immediate clearance on runway 27. From his position in the tower, Khalil could see nothing but the deep indigo sky punctuated by navigation lights of scheduled commercial traffic. But something in that voice, something in the controlled urgency, made him reach for his binoculars. The duty officer, Captain Rashid, was already pulling up radar contacts on his screen, frowning at the empty display where Nightingale 77 should have appeared. Negative radar contact, Nightingale 77. Squawk 7700 and state your position. Unable to comply with transponder request, tower. Visual on your field, approaching from the northwest. I have emergency fuel situation and request immediate priority landing. Khalil swept his binoculars across the northwestern approach vector. Commercial flights from Lahore wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. Military exercises weren't scheduled until 800. Yet somewhere out there, a pilot was running on fumes and asking for help with a voice that suggested she'd been places where help was a luxury few could afford. The mystery deepened when Captain Rashid looked up from his radar scope, confusion etched across his weathered face. "Sir, I'm showing completely clear airspace. No contacts within 50 kilometers." But Khalil's trained eyes caught something else entirely. A faint glimmer in the darkness, moving against the star field with purposeful precision. Not the steady glow of navigation lights, but something altogether different. The aircraft, whatever it was, seemed to shimmer in and out of visibility, like heat waves rising from summer tarmac. Nightingale 77 Tower, we don't have you on radar. Confirm your aircraft type and souls on board. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a weight that made both men in the tower straighten instinctively. Tower, single soul on board, aircraft type. Let's just say you haven't seen one like this before. And tower. The transmission paused, crackling with atmospheric interference. My canopy lights are going to start flashing. Don't be alarmed. It's just old habits from old wars. That's when squadron leader Khalil noticed the pattern in the darkness. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short again. His grandfather's generation would have recognized it immediately. The international distress signal, transmitted not by radio, but by the ancient language of light itself. Morse code, precise and deliberate, cutting through the modern electromagnetic noise with the clarity of desperate necessity. Captain Rashid had been monitoring Pakistani airspace for 12 years, but he'd never seen anything that made his instruments behave like this. Every screen showed empty sky, yet his eyes tracked something moving with predatory grace toward their runway. The approaching aircraft seemed to bend light around itself, visible only in peripheral vision, like trying to stare directly at a ghost. "Sir," Rashid whispered, his voice tight with professional concern, "regulations require positive identification before we can authorize emergency landing clearance." Khalil lowered his binoculars, studying the pattern of lights that continued to pulse in the ancient rhythm of mariners and aviators long dead. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. SOS. Save our souls. A call for help that transcended nationality, politics, or the classified boundaries that seemed to shroud this mysterious arrival. Nightingale 77 Tower, we copy your distress signal. Are you declaring Mayday? The response came immediately, crisp and matter-of-fact. Negative, Tower. I'm declaring something much more complicated than that. Static filled the channel for several heartbeats. I'm declaring homecoming. Khalil felt something cold settle in his stomach. The word homecoming carried implications that went far beyond routine emergency procedures. It suggested someone returning from places that officially didn't exist, carrying secrets that weren't supposed to make it back to friendly airspace. He glanced at Rashid, whose face had gone pale under the green glow of his radar displays. Outside, the lights continued their patient Morse pattern, while something that shouldn't exist approached their runway with the confidence of someone who'd done this dance before. Khalil picked up the red phone that connected directly to Sector Command. Some mysteries were too dangerous to solve at the local level. But before he could dial, the voice crackled through their headsets again. "Tower, be advised. I'm carrying some things that might make your bosses nervous, but I'm also carrying some things that might save lives. Your choice whether to roll the dice." The implication hung in the air like cordite smoke. This wasn't just an emergency landing request. This was someone offering to trade secrets for sanctuary, using an airfield as neutral ground for negotiations that probably violated several international treaties. Khalil had spent enough years in uniform to recognize the sound of someone who'd operated beyond the reach of normal command structures. The voice on the radio carried the particular exhaustion that came from making impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. The kind of weariness that soaked into your bones after too many missions that never made it into official reports. Nightingale 77, state your intentions. Tower, my intentions are to land this aircraft, debrief with appropriate personnel, and then disappear into whatever bureaucratic hole they want to bury me in. But first, I need to get home. And Tower. The voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement if the circumstances had been different. Home is wherever they speak my language. And right now, that appears to be your runway. Squadron leader Khalil made a decision that would haunt his career for years to come. He keyed his microphone and spoke the words that would transform a routine night shift into a classified incident that would require signatures from people whose names he'd never be allowed to know. Nightingale 77, you are cleared for emergency landing. Runway 27. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited. Emergency services are standing by. As he spoke the words, Khalil wondered if he was authorizing the landing of a friendly aircraft, or opening the door for something that would change everything he thought he understood about the nature of modern warfare. The lights in the distance pulsed once more in their ancient rhythm, and then went dark completely. What approached their runway now was invisible to every sensor they possessed, but undeniably real. Khalil could feel it in the way the air seemed to thicken with anticipation, the way his instruments registered subtle anomalies that suggested something was bending the normal rules of physics just enough to remain undetectable. The emergency klaxons began wailing across the base as fire trucks and medical personnel rushed toward runway 27. But Khalil suspected that whatever was about to land wouldn't require traditional emergency services. This felt like the kind of situation that would be handled by people who carried credentials instead of medical supplies, who asked questions that weren't supposed to have answers. In the distance, navigation lights suddenly blazed to life as the mysterious aircraft broke from whatever stealth envelope had been protecting it. What Khalil saw through his binoculars made him question everything he thought he knew about aviation technology. The aircraft that lined up on their runway didn't belong to any air force he could identify, and its configuration suggested capabilities that weren't supposed to exist outside of theoretical research. But it flew like something piloted by someone who'd mastered machines that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The approach was textbook perfect, executed with the kind of precision that came from flying aircraft that demanded absolute perfection or absolute death. As the mysterious craft touched down on Pakistani soil, squadron leader Khalil realized he'd just become part of something that would never appear in any official record. The kind of incident that created paperwork with classification levels he'd never heard of, overseen by people whose existence was as compartmentalized as the technologies they protected. The landing was so smooth it seemed almost anticlimactic. No dramatic emergency braking, no deployed chutes, no visible signs of the fuel emergency that had prompted the initial request. Just a perfect touchdown executed by someone who'd clearly done this before, in circumstances that were probably much more challenging than a Pakistani military airfield on a calm night. Ground control vectored the aircraft toward a remote taxiway, well away from any civilian areas or routine military traffic. Standard protocol for anything that arrived carrying secrets too dangerous for casual observation. Khalil watched through his binoculars as ground crews approached with the cautious professionalism of people who'd been briefed on how to handle unusual situations without asking uncomfortable questions. But what happened next challenged every assumption about who was flying that aircraft. The canopy opened with a soft hydraulic hiss, and instead of the grizzled special operations pilot that everyone expected, a figure emerged that made several of the ground crew personnel stop in their tracks and stare. The pilot who climbed down from the cockpit was unmistakably female, moving with the fluid economy of someone accustomed to operating in environments where wasted motion could mean death. She wore a flight suit that bore no national insignia, no rank markings, nothing that would identify her nationality or military affiliation. But her bearing, the way she conducted her post-flight inspection, the professional courtesy with which she acknowledged the ground crew, everything suggested someone who'd earned her place in that cockpit through competence rather than politics. Captain Rashid, watching through the tower's powerful telescopes, whistled softly under his breath. "Sir, that's not what I was expecting." Khalil had to agree. Military aviation remained a predominantly male profession in most air forces, and pilots qualified on experimental aircraft were rarer still. But the woman conducting her shutdown procedures with mechanical precision clearly belonged in that cockpit, carried herself like someone who'd earned the right to fly machines that most people weren't qualified to understand, much less operate. She completed her post-flight checklist with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her approach and landing. Every movement suggested someone who'd been trained to standards that went beyond normal military requirements, someone who'd learned to fly aircraft that demanded absolute precision, because the margin for error was measured in microseconds rather than minutes. When she finally stepped away from the aircraft, the woman looked up toward the control tower and raised her hand in a casual salute. Even at distance, there was something in that gesture that suggested familiarity with protocols that weren't taught in standard pilot training programs. This was someone who'd operated in environments where traditional command structures were luxuries that couldn't always be afforded. Two vehicles approached from different directions. A standard military sedan carrying what appeared to be base security personnel, and a black SUV with tinted windows that practically screamed classified operations. The woman waited calmly between them, apparently unconcerned about whatever interrogation was about to begin. But before either vehicle reached her position, she keyed a handheld radio and transmitted on the tower frequency one final time. Her voice carried clearly through the pre-dawn air, professional and matter-of-fact, tinged with something that might have been relief. Falcon Tower, Nightingale 77 is secure. Aircraft systems normal, pilot condition green. Thank you for the hospitality. A pause, filled with static and the distant sound of jet engines spooling down. And Tower, tell your sector commander that Reaper sends her regards. Some of you might remember that call sign from places that officially never happened. The transmission ended with a click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the control tower. Khalil and Rashid exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the implications of what they'd just heard. Reaper wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend whispered in certain military circles, associated with operations that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in modern warfare. Squadron leader Khalil had heard stories about a pilot-designated Reaper who'd conducted solo missions deep into contested airspace, flying aircraft that existed only as rumors and speculation. Someone who'd earned a reputation for accomplishing objectives that were considered theoretically impossible, using tactics that challenged conventional understanding of air combat doctrine. But the stories always described Reaper as a shadow, a ghost pilot whose true identity was classified beyond the reach of normal intelligence channels. No one had ever suggested that the legendary pilot might be a woman, or that she might one day land at a Pakistani airfield requesting emergency clearance and carrying secrets that could reshape regional security dynamics. The black SUV reached the aircraft first, and three figures in civilian clothing emerged with the purposeful efficiency of people accustomed to handling sensitive situations. They approached the woman with respectful caution, the kind of deference normally reserved for senior officers or foreign dignitaries, whose true importance couldn't be immediately assessed. But instead of the tense confrontation that Khalil expected, the lead figure extended his hand in what appeared to be a gesture of professional recognition. The woman responded with a handshake that suggested familiarity, as if she dealt with similar situations before and understood the protocols that governed these interactions. The conversation that followed was too distant to overhear, but the body language suggested negotiation rather than interrogation. The woman gestured occasionally toward her aircraft, apparently providing technical details or operational parameters that her handlers needed to understand. Her responses appeared calm and comprehensive, the kind of thorough briefing that suggested someone comfortable with debriefing procedures. After several minutes of discussion, the group moved toward the black SUV. But before entering the vehicle, the woman turned back toward her aircraft and spent several moments studying it with what appeared to be professional satisfaction, mixed with something that might have been nostalgia. The kind of look that pilots reserve for machines that have carried them through circumstances that tested the limits of both aircraft and human endurance. Then she climbed into the SUV and disappeared behind tinted windows, leaving behind only questions and an aircraft that would presumably be studied by people whose existence was as classified as the technologies they analyzed. The sedan followed the SUV toward the main base, carrying away the only witnesses to an incident that would never appear in any official report. Captain Rashid broke the silence first. "Sir, what do we log in the incident report?" It was a good question, and one that probably didn't have a standard answer. Khalil considered the various options, all of which involved classification levels that would make the paperwork disappear into bureaucratic black holes that were designed to protect information too sensitive for normal distribution. Emergency landing, aircraft type classified, pilot transferred to appropriate authorities, he said finally. Anything else goes in a separate report with a classification level that ensures only the right people ever see it. Outside, ground crews were already preparing to move the mysterious aircraft to a secure hangar, handling it with the careful professionalism of people who understood that some technologies required special handling procedures. The aircraft itself would disappear into the kind of classified storage facility where interesting objects waited for analysis by people whose job descriptions couldn't be discussed at dinner parties. But the memory of that voice, calm and professional under pressure, would linger in the control tower long after the paperwork had been filed and forgotten. The sound of someone who'd pushed the boundaries of what was possible in modern aviation, carrying secrets that could probably reshape strategic balance if they ever became public knowledge. Squadron leader Khalil settled back in his chair and reached for his fourth cup of chai, trying to process what he'd witnessed during what should have been a routine night shift. In 12 years of military service, he'd handled countless emergency landings, but none that left him feeling like he'd just observed something that would influence geopolitical dynamics for years to come. The sun was beginning to rise over the Pakistani landscape, painting the eastern sky with shades of gold and crimson that reminded him why he'd chosen to serve his country in uniform. But the events of the past few hours suggested that the nature of that service was evolving in ways that challenged traditional understanding of national security and military technology. Somewhere in a secure facility, a woman known only by a legendary call sign was probably beginning a debriefing process that would provide intelligence analysts with information they'd been seeking for years. Details about aircraft performance, operational capabilities, and tactical innovations that could influence military aviation development for decades. But Khalil suspected that the most important aspect of the incident wasn't the technology or the intelligence value. It was the demonstration that legends sometimes turned out to be real, that the stories whispered in military circles occasionally involved real people doing impossible things in circumstances that pushed human and machine performance beyond documented limits. The radio crackled with routine morning traffic as commercial flights began requesting clearance for departure. Normal operations resumed with the methodical precision that characterized military aviation. But something had changed in the subtle atmosphere of the control tower. The knowledge that extraordinary things could happen during ordinary shifts, that the boundaries between routine operations and classified incidents were thinner than most people realized. As the morning progressed, and the mysterious incident became just another classified entry in their logbooks, Khalil found himself wondering about the woman who'd identified herself as Reaper. What kind of training produced pilots capable of flying aircraft that existed beyond public knowledge? What circumstances created opportunities for solo operations that challenged the conventional wisdom about air combat doctrine? More importantly, what did it mean that such a pilot had chosen to land at their airfield, carrying secrets that could influence regional security dynamics? The implications suggested strategic developments that went far beyond routine military exercises or standard intelligence operations. The answers to those questions would remain classified at levels that ensured only the most senior decision makers ever gained access to the complete picture. But the incident itself had demonstrated something that couldn't be classified away. The reality that modern warfare was evolving in directions that challenged traditional understanding of what was possible when human skill met advanced technology. By noon, the mysterious aircraft had disappeared into a secure hangar, and the only evidence of the incident was a brief entry in the tower's classified logbook. But the memory of that calm, professional voice would linger in Squadron Leader Khalil's mind for years to come, a reminder that some of the most significant events in military history happened during shifts that started out feeling perfectly routine. The woman known as Reaper had vanished into whatever bureaucratic processes were designed to handle situations that transcended normal classification levels. But her brief appearance had provided a glimpse into a world where the boundaries between possible and impossible were constantly being redefined by people whose existence remained as classified as their achievements. Hours later, when the incident had been properly documented and filed according to protocols that ensured appropriate security classification, Captain Rashid asked the question that had been troubling both men since the mysterious landing. "Sir, do you think we'll ever know what this was really about?" Khalil considered the question while watching routine military traffic pattern around their airfield, with the predictable efficiency that characterized peacetime operations. The events of the early morning seemed almost surreal in contrast to the normal rhythm of scheduled flights and standard procedures. Probably not, he admitted, but I suspect that's the point. Some operations are designed to remain invisible, to accomplish objectives without creating political complications or diplomatic incidents. What we witnessed was probably the end of something that started months or years ago in places that don't appear on any official maps. The implications were both fascinating and troubling. Military operations that existed beyond the reach of normal oversight, conducted by personnel whose identities were as classified as their mission parameters. A parallel world of strategic activities that influenced global security dynamics without ever appearing in public reports or parliamentary debates. But the professionalism with which the incident had been handled, from the initial radio contact through the final transfer to appropriate authorities, suggested that such operations were conducted within frameworks that maintained accountability even when transparency wasn't possible. Classified oversight for classified activities, ensuring that democratic principles were preserved even when democratic processes couldn't be applied directly. As afternoon shifted toward evening, Squadron Leader Khalil completed his shift report and prepared to transfer control to the night crew. The incident involving Nightingale 77 would be briefed to his replacement through channels that ensured continuity while maintaining appropriate security classifications. But the personal impact of witnessing something that challenged his understanding of modern military capabilities would remain with him long after the official reports had been filed and forgotten. The knowledge that somewhere, people were pushing the boundaries of what was possible in aviation technology, conducting operations that existed at the intersection of human skill and machine capability. The sun set over Pakistani airspace with the same golden beauty that had marked countless evenings throughout his military career. But this particular sunset carried the weight of questions that couldn't be asked and answers that couldn't be shared, the burden of knowledge that came with witnessing events that would influence history while remaining forever classified. In secure facilities scattered across the region, intelligence analysts were probably beginning their assessment of whatever information had arrived with the mysterious pilot. Technical specifications, operational parameters, tactical innovations that could influence military planning for years to come. But the human element, the demonstration of skill and courage that had made the intelligence possible, would remain as classified as the information itself. The night crew arrived with the casual professionalism that characterized shift changes in military installations around the world. The briefing was thorough, but necessarily limited, covering the essential details while omitting the speculative elements that made the incident so fascinating. Captain Rashid gathered his personal equipment and prepared to leave the tower, but paused at the door to take one final look at the empty sky where something impossible had appeared just hours earlier. The visual reminder that normal and extraordinary could coexist in the same airspace, separated only by classification levels and security clearances that determined who was allowed to know about the intersection. As Khalil walked across the darkened base toward his quarters, he found himself thinking about the woman who'd identified herself as Reaper. What kind of person accepted assignments that required flying alone into contested airspace, using aircraft that existed beyond public knowledge? What motivated someone to accept risks that transcended normal military service, to operate in environments where mission success depended on individual skill rather than institutional support? The questions had no easy answers, but the incident had provided a glimpse into a world where such questions mattered, where strategic objectives required capabilities that pushed beyond documented limits, where success depended on individuals who could perform beyond normal human parameters when circumstances demanded impossible achievements. Sleep came slowly that night, interrupted by dreams of aircraft that moved like shadows and voices that spoke with calm professionalism under circumstances that would challenge the courage of most military personnel. The subconscious processing of an experience that challenged conventional understanding of what was possible when technology met human determination. But morning brought routine duties and standard procedures, the comfortable predictability of scheduled operations and regular protocols. The extraordinary incident became just another classified entry in logbooks that would eventually be archived in facilities where interesting events waited for historians who might never be cleared to read them. Days passed with the normal rhythm of military aviation operations, but something had changed in the atmosphere of the control tower. An awareness that routine could be interrupted by events that challenged assumptions about the nature of modern warfare, that the boundaries between ordinary and extraordinary were maintained by classification levels rather than physical impossibilities. Week after week, Squadron Leader Khalil continued his duties with the same professional dedication that had characterized his entire career. But the memory of that calm, competent voice would surface occasionally during quiet moments, a reminder that some of the most significant achievements in military aviation happened in circumstances that could never be publicly acknowledged. The mystery of Nightingale 77 gradually became part of the tower's unofficial folklore, one of those incidents that created shared experiences among personnel who'd witnessed something that couldn't be discussed outside secure environments. The kind of story that built unit cohesion while maintaining operational security, demonstrating that extraordinary events could happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone with the appropriate security clearances. Months later, when new personnel rotated through the tower, the incident would be briefed as a case study in handling unusual situations that required immediate decisions under ambiguous circumstances. The training value was significant, even when the specific details remained classified at levels that ensured only authorized personnel ever gained access to the complete picture. But for those who'd been present during those pre-dawn hours, the incident represented something more significant than training material or case studies. It was proof that legends sometimes turned out to be real, that the stories whispered in military circles occasionally involved actual people doing impossible things in circumstances that pushed the boundaries of human and machine capability. The woman known as Reaper had disappeared into whatever classified world produced pilots capable of flying aircraft that existed beyond public knowledge. But her brief appearance had demonstrated something that couldn't be classified away: the reality that modern military aviation was evolving in directions that challenged traditional understanding of what was possible when skill met technology. Years would pass before any public acknowledgement of the technologies that had made that mysterious landing possible. Decades might go by before the strategic implications became clear to historians with appropriate security clearances. But the human element, the demonstration of professional competence under extraordinary circumstances, would remain in the memories of those who'd witnessed it, a reminder that some achievements transcended the technologies that made them possible. The legend of Reaper would continue to evolve in the shadowy world of classified operations, adding new chapters that would never appear in official histories or public reports. But for Squadron Leader Khalil and Captain Rashid, the incident had provided a glimpse into that hidden world, a brief intersection between routine duties and extraordinary realities that operated just beyond the reach of normal understanding. In the end, the most significant aspect of the incident wasn't the advanced technology or the intelligence value. It was the human reminder that individual excellence could transcend institutional limitations, that some people were willing to accept risks that went beyond normal military service to accomplish objectives that influenced global security dynamics. The sky above Pakistani airspace continued to host routine commercial traffic and standard military exercises, but it also carried the memory of something that had challenged assumptions about the nature of modern aviation: the knowledge that extraordinary capabilities existed within the classified world of military operations, maintained by people whose achievements would remain forever hidden behind security classifications that protected capabilities too sensitive for public discussion. And somewhere, in facilities whose locations were as classified as their purposes, a woman known by a legendary callsign was probably preparing for her next assignment, carrying skills and knowledge that pushed the boundaries of what was possible when human determination met advanced technology. The next chapter in a story that would continue to evolve in the shadows, influencing events while remaining forever invisible to those who weren't cleared to know that such stories existed at all. But the memory of that voice, calm and professional under pressure, would linger as a reminder that some of the most important work in military aviation was being done by people whose names would never appear in public records, whose achievements would be measured by objectives accomplished rather than recognition received. The incident involving Nightingale 77 had ended with a perfect landing and a classified debriefing, but the implications would continue to influence military aviation development for years to come. Technologies demonstrated, capabilities proven, limits transcended by someone whose existence was as classified as her achievements, but whose competence had been demonstrated under circumstances that left no room for doubt about her qualifications to fly machines that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in modern warfare. The legend lived on, carried forward by those who'd witnessed a brief intersection between the routine and the extraordinary, between the documented and the classified, between the possible and the legendary. And in control towers around the world, operators continued their duties with the knowledge that any shift might bring contact with something that challenged their understanding of what was possible when human skill met machines that existed at the very edge of technological capability.